So let us continue with what we had started in the last video, which was solving questions related to nested loops. And we had started with the subcategory, which I have named as box, where what are we doing is we're printing patterns of these kinds. That is the ones where we have got a box, a square box, and we're printing various things in them. So out of the 14 questions that we have in the list, we have solved 7 already, which was up to here. So let's continue and let's take a look at this question. Now, the question is pretty simple. For the value of n equal to 5, we will have 5 lines and each line will have 5 digits getting printed. So it will simply be a box of 5 cross 5. And the first line will be 10101. The second one will be 01010. The third one will be 10101 and so on. So let's discuss how can we solve this first, and then let's write the code for this. So we know that to solve questions like these, where we have got square box of n cross n, what we will have to do is we will have to use a nested loop where the outer loop will go from 0 to n minus 1 and the inner loop will also go from 0 to n minus 1, right? And if we do that, we get combinations like these: 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, and so on, all the way up to 4, 0, 4, 1, 4, 2, 4, 3, and 4, 4, assuming that the value of n is 5. So what are we going to do next is we're going to map the first line with this, that is, with what we will have to do if the value of I is 0. So the first thing that we will print is 1, which means when I is 0 and j is 0, we will print 1, then 0, then 1, then 0, and then 1, right? This is how the first line will be taken care of. The second line would be 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, right? And similarly, the third, the fourth, and fifth line will be this. Now, on the basis of whatever we had discussed earlier, that is in the last video, what we will have to do is we will have to somehow figure out what to put in each of these iterations. So taking a look at the pattern that we are supposed to print, we have to put either 1 or 0, right? These are the only 2 digits that we're going to use. Now, the next thing is to determine or to figure out how to decide whether to put 1 or 0. So for that, let's take a look at whatever we have here. So when I is 0 and j is 0, we have to put 1. Then the next time we put 1, the value of I will be 0 and the value of j will be 2. Then the next time we put 1, the value of I is 0 and j is 4, right? The next time we are putting 1, both of them are 1. Then if we continue, we will see that the next time we are putting 1 is when I is 1 and j is 3. Now, if we take a look at where we are putting zeros, we will see that we are putting the first 0 when I is 0 and j is 1. The next 0 when I is 0 and j is 3. Then the next one is at I1, J0. Next one is at I1, J2. And the next one is at I1, J4, right? So what did we observe here was we are putting 1 in these coordinates. So 0, 0, then 0, 2 and 0, 4, right? So 0, 2, 0, 4, then 1, 1 and 1, 3. So 1, 1 and 1, 3. And if we continue, we will get some more coordinates. But let's not continue any further because I am assuming that this would be sufficient for us to figure out a pattern. Next thing is, let's check where are we putting zeros at. So the first 0 is at 0, 1, then 0, 3, then 1, 0. So 0, 1, 0, 3, 1, 0. Then it is 1, 2 and 1, 4. So 1, 2 and 1, 4. Now observe this and tell me what can you see? Well, I see that if I take the coordinates, that is the values of I and j, and I add them up, if I get an even number, I am printing 1. And if I get an odd number, I am printing 0. So how do we determine if we have to print 0 or 1? We simply add the current values of I and j and check if it is an even number or an odd number. If it is an even number, we print 1. And if it is an odd number, we're going to print 0. Now, although I've taken only 2 rows, if you check for the next 3 rows as well, you'll get the same thing. So this is for the value of n equal to 5. Now, will this hold true even if the value of n changes? That is, it becomes 6, for example. Let's find out. So this is what we will have when n is equal to 6. Let's write the code for this. And for that, let's come to IntelliJ. Let's create a new Java class. Let's name this as Q8. And what are we going to do next is create a main method, declare a variable called n, and I initialize 5 to it. And let's have a loop. So it will be for int I is equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus. Then it will be for int j is equal to 0 inside the main loop or the outer loop, j less than n, j plus plus. Now what are we supposed to do is we're supposed to add I and j and check if they're either even or odd. So we'll do if I plus j and then mod 2 is equal to 0, which means I and j adds up to an even number. What are we supposed to do is we're supposed to print 1, and this will be system.out.print. And in the else block, we'll say system.out.print 0. Then at the end of the inner for loop, that is after the inner for loop completes, we will just have a system.out.println so that the cursor moves to the next line. Now, if I run this code, I should get 10101 in the first line, then 01010 and so on in the next 4 lines. And if I change this to 6, I should get 101010 in the first line, then 010101 in the next line, and so on. And that is what we are getting. So with this, we have solved this question. Now let's move on to the next one, which is this. 1 followed by 4 zeros, and then 0, then 1 followed by 3 more zeros, and then 0, 0, then 1, and then 2 more zeros, and so on. So if you look at this, you will observe that the diagonal is 1. And being more specific, this is the primary diagonal. So what we have to do is we have to print 1 in primary diagonal. All the other places will have 0, right? So let's understand how can we solve this. So take a look at this. Now we have got 1 at a few places, and in rest of the places we have got zeros, right? So if you take a look, you would observe that we have 1 at 0, 0. Then we have another one at 1, 1. Then another one at 2, 2, and so on. So what does this tell you? This tells you that when I and j are equal, we are going to put a 1 over there. And in all the other cases, we will put a 0, right? This is how simple the solution to this question will be. So let's come back to IntelliJ. Let's create a new Java class. Let's name this class as Q9. Let's quickly have a main method, and let's grab the loop and variable declaration from Q8. Let's paste it here. Now let's get rid of the if else we have over here. And what we will have to do is we'll have to have if, of course. The condition will change. The condition will be if I equal to j. That is, if both I and j are equal, what are we supposed to do is we're supposed to print 1. And in all the other cases, we are supposed to print 0, right? And with this, if I run the code, I should get 1 in primary diagonal, and I messed up somewhere, which is here. I should have put system.out.print and not system.out.println. So if I run this now, you can see that we have got 1 in primary diagonal. And that is what was expected in the question, right? So with this, we solved this question. And let's take a look at the next one. The next one looks similar, right? But instead of primary diagonal, we have got 1 in the secondary diagonal. So let's understand how can we solve this question. So if you take a look at this, what do you see? Well, we have got the first one at 0, 4, as in the coordinates are 0 and 4. The next one is at 1, 3. Then the next one is at 2, 2. Next one is at 3, 1. And then last one is at 4, 0. So if I list all of these coordinates down, where we have got 1, this is what we will get. So take a look at this and tell me what you observe. Well, if I take the coordinate, as in if I take the value of I and j and I add them up, what am I getting? We will get 4, right? So 0 plus 4 will give us 4, 1 plus 3 will give us 4, 2 plus 2 will give us 4, and the same thing holds for these two as well. Now the next question is, where is this 4 coming from? So if you take a look, the first one is 0 and 4. Because n is equal to 5, the first place that we are getting 1 at is 0, comma 4. If n was 6 instead, we would have got the first one over here, right? And the next one would have been here and here, here, and so on, all the way till here, right? So since n is equal to 5, what do we have here is, we have the values of I and j such that when I add them up, I get 4, which is n minus 1. Now if n was 6, we would have to take those values of I and j, which will give us n minus 1, that is 5 when adding. So the solution to this is pretty simple. Print 1 at all of those coordinates where the values of I and j when added gives n minus 1, right? So with this understood, let us come back to IntelliJ and let's write the code for this. And for this, let me create a new Java class. Let's name this class as Q10. And what am I going to do is grab the main method from here, close this, and paste it here. Now, what are we supposed to do next? Well, we are supposed to add I and j. So we'll say I plus j. Now, what should this be equal to? This should be equal to n minus 1. So when this is true, we print 1, otherwise we print 0. So let's run the code and check if we are getting the correct output or not, and looks like we are. If I change the value of n from 6 to 5, we should still be getting the correct output. And we are getting, right? So even this question is solved. Now let's move on to the next one, which is this. So over here, what do we see? We've got n is equal to 5. So we've got 5 rows and 5 columns. Now in the first row, there's only one place where 1 is getting printed, which is the third column out of the 5 column that we have. The same thing holds for the second row. But in the third row, all of the row contains 1 only. There are no zeros. But it changes in the fourth row and in the fifth row as well. So if you take a look, you would observe that if n is equal to 5, we are printing the middle row and middle column, right? Now this would be applicable when n is equal to 5, which is an odd number. But what would happen if n is equal to 6? Well, before we discuss that, let's figure out how can we print this. So take a look at this and tell me, how do we determine where to print 1 and where to print zeros? So this is for the case where n is equal to 5, which is an odd number. And since n is equal to 5 is an odd number, we've got only one center row and one center column, right? So before we get to how to determine the row number and the column number, let's also take a look at the case where the value of n would be an even number, say 6. So if n is 6, this is what we should get, right? Because n was 5, which is an odd number, we had one center row and one center column. But when n is 6, which is an even number, we will have two center rows and two center columns, right? Now, the next question is, how do we determine the row number and the column number? So let's take a look at the case where n is equal to 5. Now, since n is equal to 5, we've got rows starting from 0 all the way up to 4 and columns starting from 0 all the way up to 4. So if I start from 0 and go till 4, we will have 2, which is the half of 4 as the center row. And the same thing applies to center column as well, right? So we can say that the center row and center column will be at 4 by 2, which is just equal to n minus 1 by 2, where n is 5, right? Now let's apply the same logic to this and see if it works. So over here, since we are starting from 0 and going all the way up to 5, which is 6 counts in total, the center is at 2 and 3, right? Now if we apply the same logic that we had taken over here, which was n minus 1 by 2, what do we get? Well, n is 6. So 6 minus 1 is 5. And if I go for 5 by 2, what are we going to get? Well, we will get 2, assuming that we are storing in integer, because storing in float will not be useful over here. So what are we going to get here is 2. So that means I can go for n minus 1 by 2, which was what we did over here, to get one of the row and one of the columns. So 6 minus 1 is 5. 5 by 2 will give us 2. So we will get this and this, right? But what about this one? That is 3 over here. Well, it is pretty straightforward. Since n is equal to 6, we can get this by saying n by 2, right? So we'll say n by 2, that will give us 3 and this 3. So taking a look at whatever we have discussed so far, what can we observe? Well, if n is an odd number, all we have to do is go for n minus 1 by 2. So let me write it down over here so that we can take a look at all of them combined. So if n is an odd number, we have to go for n minus 1 by 2. Now, if n is an even number, we have to go for n minus 1 by 2. But we also have to go for n by 2. So n is an even number, we have to go for n minus 1 by 2, but we also have to go for n by 2, right? So it looks like we have got a solution. What we have to do is we have to check if n equal to 5, that is n is an odd number, or n is an even number. If n is an odd number, calculate that one center row and center column and put 1 over there and put 0 in all of the other places. But if n is an even number, calculate the 2 center rows and 2 center columns and put 1 in those center rows and center column and put 0 in all of the other cases. So this will solve our problem, but the solution is kind of complex. But still, let's implement this and then let's think about simplifying it. So for that, let's come back to IntelliJ. Let me create a new Java class. Let's name this as Q11 Solution 1, because we know that we are going to go for another solution which is simpler than this. So that's why Q11 Solution 1. Let's have a main method. And over here, let's create a variable called n. Let's put, say, 6 over here. Now, what are we supposed to do is, we're supposed to first of all determine if n is an even number or an odd number. So we'll do this. If n mod 2 is equal to 0. And we'll have an else also, right? Now, if n mod 2 is equal to 0, we will have 2 such center rows and 2 such center columns. So we can say, for example, first, and this first will be n minus 1 by 2, right? And we'll have another one, which is, let's say, second, and this second will be n by 2. And if n is odd, we'll have just this first, right? So if n is even, what we will have to do is, we'll have to iterate from 0 all the way up to n minus 1. And this will be a nested loop. So j is equal to 0, j less than n, j plus plus, right? And what we will have to do is, we will have to check if I is equal to first or I is equal to second, right? Or j is equal to first or j is equal to second. Because in all of these cases, that is whether the row number matches the first that we have calculated, or the row number matches the second we have calculated, or the column number matches the first or second, what we have to do is, we have to print 1, right? And in all of the other cases, we will have to print 0. And after this for loop, let's add a blank println statement. Now, this is for the case when n is an even number. Now, let's copy this and put this over here for the cases where n is an odd number. And what changes will we have to make over here is, we'll just have to check if I is equal to first or j is equal to first, right? And all of the other parts of the code will remain the same. So if I run the code now, what do we get? Well, we get this. And that's what we expected. If I change this to 5, what will we get? Well, we will get whatever we had expected, right? So this code seems to be working absolutely fine. Now we have got first and second over here, right? And we have got only first over here, which means this first variable is something that we will have to calculate anyway, irrespective of the fact whether we have an even number or an odd number. So what am I going to do is I'm going to keep that out of the if else block. That means this first gets calculated no matter whether n is an even number or odd number. But this second gets calculated if and only if n is an even number, right? And that makes sense, right? So if I run the code, the output should remain unchanged. So n is equal to 5 gave us the same output as the last time, and n is equal to 6 will also give us the same output as the last time, right? Now, just out of curiosity, can we take even this out? That is, can we take int second is equal to n by 2 out? Well, we can, but if we do that, we will end up in a situation where this first and second will be used only here. That is, only if n mod 2 is equal to 0. It won't be used here at all. That is in else. And that is not a problem actually, right? So if I run the code again, it should give us the exact same output as the last time, right? Now, since we have got first and second outside of the if else block, I also want to check what the values of the variable first and second will be. And I want to do this for both cases. That is, irrespective of the fact that n is an odd number or an even number. So if n is equal to 5 and I run this code, I get first as 2 and second also as 2. All right. And if I change n is equal to 6, that is, I change n to 6, I should get first is equal to 2 and second is equal to 3, right? So what did we observe here was first and second will be the same, as in they will have the same value if n is odd number. But if n is an even number, first and second will have different values, right? So can we use that to our advantage to simplify this code? Well, let's try. So if first equal to second, we know that n is odd, which means the else part. But if first and second are not equal, we know that n is even. So can we replace n mod 2 equal to 0 with first not equal to second? We can, right? And it will give us the same output. As you can see, for n is equal to 6, this is what we got. For n is equal to 5, if I run the code, this is what we have, right? So this didn't really simplify the code. What are we trying to do is we're trying to simplify the code, right? Which means we will essentially try to have just one for loop, which takes care of all of the values of n, be it odd or even. So how can we do that? So let's take a look at the for loop over here, right? So what are we doing here is we are checking if I equal to first or I equal to second or j equal to first or j equal to second. So if first and second are not equal, what will happen is I will be compared against two different values, right? So for example, let's say first is 2 and second is 3. This will check I and compare it with 2 and it will compare it with 3. But if both of them are the same value, that is 2, I will be compared with 2 twice, right? Which is not a problem. So what I'm trying to say is, irrespective of whether the value of first and value of second are equal or not, we can still use this condition to check and print 1 or 0, right? If first and second are equal, we will be checking the same condition twice, which is not going to change our output. But if first and second are not equal, we will be checking two different conditions, which is something we want if n ends up being an even number, right? So that means that once we have got first and second, what we can do is we can get rid of the if else block altogether. We can use just this for loop, right? Because this is checking for both first and second, and not this one, of course, because this is checking only for first, right? So we can take just this for loop and we can get rid of the if else and we can paste that for loop over here. And if we run the code, we expect the output to be the same as the last time. So for n is equal to 5, which is an odd number, it worked. But let's see if it works for n is equal to 6 or not. And it did. So this way, we have taken care of this question, right? Where we were supposed to print 1 in the center row and center column. So with this clear, let's move on to the next question, which is this one. And here what's happening is, given n is equal to 5, we are printing asterisk. And the asterisk is getting printed in the first row and the last row, and the first column and the last column. So let's understand how can we solve this. So this is what we have, right? And here n is equal to 5. So we have to print asterisk in the first row and in the last row and in the first column and in the last column. So from the looks of it, it looks pretty simple, right? All we have to do is determine if we are on the first row or last row or first column or last column, right? So that can be done by using I and j. So if I is 0, we will be on the first row. And if I is 4, and 4 because n is equal to 5. So if I is equal to 4, we will be in the last row. Similarly, if j is 0, we will be in the first column. And if j is 4, we will be in the last column. So what we can do is, given n, we can check if I is equal to 0 or n minus 1, or j is equal to 0 or n minus 1 or not. So if I is equal to 0 or n minus 1, or j is equal to 0 or n minus 1, we can print an asterisk. And in all the other cases, we can print a blank space, right? This way, we will be able to solve this question. So to solve this, let's come back to IntelliJ. And what are we going to do here is close this and create a new Java class. And let's name this new Java class as Q12. And by the way, I had mentioned that there will be 2 solutions for question 11, but we have put both of the solution in the same class. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Let's come back to the solution to question 12. So here, let's create a variable called n, which is equal to 5. And what are we going to do is, we're going to iterate from 0 to 4, given that n is equal to 5, right? And we will have inner loop as well. So int j is equal to 0, j is less than n, j plus plus. And what are we going to do is, we're going to check if I is equal to 0 or I is equal to n minus 1 or j is equal to 0 or j is equal to n minus 1. If any of these conditions matches, we're going to print what? We're going to print an asterisk with a space. And if none of these condition matches, we will print a space followed by a space, right? And 2 spaces over here so that the alignment is proper, because we are printing 2 characters here. So we should be printing 2 characters here as well. And here we will have a println statement. And if I run the code, this is what we get, which is exactly what we were expecting. If I change this to 6, this should work absolutely fine. And it does, right? So we have solved this question. Now moving on to the next question, which is this. What's happening over here is, we are printing in the first row and in the last row and in the first column and in the last column, right? But there's a slight difference over here. We're not printing asterisk, we're printing numbers. And the way we are printing number is this. The first number we are printing is 1, the second number is 2, the third number is 3, the fourth number is 4, and the fifth number is 5. And the sixth number that we are printing, which is going to be in the second row first column, is 6. And the next number that we are going to print is going to be in the last column of second row, which is 7. That is, after 6, we're printing 7 over here. Then the same thing continues in the third row. So 8 and 9 gets printed. Then in the fourth row, 10 and 11 gets printed. And lastly, 12 to 16 gets printed. So first of all, let us try to understand how can we solve this. For that, let's come back over here. And this is what we will have for the value of n equal to 5, right? So what's happening here is, only the first row, last row, first column, and last column is getting printed. All of the other are just spaces, right? Now, over here, you can see that the first number that is getting printed is 1, and it continues to 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then in the second row, only 6 and 7 gets printed. That is in the first column and the last column, right? Same thing applies to third row and fourth row. And in the last row, all of the places gets filled with numbers. So how can we approach this? Well, we can determine how to decide which row and column to print. We have discussed that already, right? So these are the rows and columns that gets printed. All of the others will have spaces. Now the next thing to do is determine how to decide what to print over there. So if you see, it is just numbers from 1 all the way up to 16. So just numbers one by one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then 6, 7, then 8, 9, then 10, 11, and 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So what we will have to do simply is we can say that count, or you can take another variable also. Let's say that variable is num. Initialize this to 1. So the first time you print, put whatever is there in num, then increase the value of num. Then the next time you print, put whatever is there in num and increase the value of num again, right? Similarly, you'll put 3 and 4 and 5, right? So you will have 5 here. Then ultimately you will print 6. Then once you print 6, what you will have to do is you will increase this to 7, right? Now, when you reach here, this is one of those cells where nothing gets printed. So you won't print anything and you will also not touch the value of num. So there's a space here, here, and here. Now, lastly, you will reach the cell where you have to print the value of num, right? And since num has got 7, you will print 7. And since you have printed a number, you will increase this to 8, right? So what will you do next? You will print 7, increase this to 8, and move here. Here also, you're supposed to print. So you print 8, then you increase this to 9, and then you move to the next cell. Nothing gets printed here also and here as well. And lastly, you print 9 over here and you continue that way, right? So in short, what you have to do is, first of all, determine which row and which column gets printed. And when you're in that row comma column position, that is in that coordinate, you print whatever is there in num. And because you're printing, you increase the value of num to the next number so that when you are in a cell which needs to be printed, you have the value available in the variable num. So every time you print, you increase the value of num. If you don't print, you don't touch the value of num, right? So with this clear, let's come back to IntelliJ and let's create a new Java class. Let's name this as Q13 and let's grab the main method from here because the logic is going to be similar. So let's paste that main method here. Now over here, what did we decide was we decided on taking a variable called num. And we can initialize this to 1 because we are indicating that the first number to get printed is 1. So we'll take num and instead of printing an asterisk, what are we going to do is we're going to print num and maybe also leave a space. So num gets printed along with a space. And over here, we will leave this untouched. And with this, what are we supposed to do next? Well, we're supposed to increase the value of num as well if num is getting printed, right? So we will increase the value of num here. Now, if we run the code, this is what we get. Now, this is not aligned properly, and that is because what's happening is we are printing num and leaving one space. So if num is a one-digit number, it will print that one-digit number and leave one space. But if num is a two-digit number, it will print that two-digit number and leave one space, which makes it a total of 3 characters. And that is why this is not aligned properly. So to fix that, what we can do is we can leave another space over here and this should work as long as the value of num is a two-digit number. So all the way up to 99. And it works, but not very well because if num is a one-digit number, we are leaving just one space, whereas we should be leaving 2 spaces. So there's an easier way to fix this actually. What you can do is instead of printing with the help of system.out.print, what you should do is you should go for system.out.printf. And over here, you'll first of all specify the number of digits for which you want to leave a space. And since we are printing integers, we can say percent, say 3D. And then you give a comma here that is outside the double quotes. And then you provide the variable which contains the value which you want to print. So if you do it this way, what's going to happen is it will print the value of num in three spaces. That is, if num is 1, what's going to happen? In three spaces, 1 will get printed. And if num is, say, 12, in these three spaces only, 12 gets printed. So the width, in a way, is fixed here. The width is 3. And if we do it this way, that is, if we fix the width to 3 here, and if we leave 3 spaces over here, the output should be properly aligned. So first of all, let's check if we have 3 spaces here or not. We have. And now let's run the code and see. And the output is properly aligned, right? So let's get rid of the print statement here. Let's also get rid of the comment over here. And this is what we have used to properly align the output. Now I'm not getting into the details of printf, but if you found this interesting and you want me to talk more about this, explain more about this, please let me know in the comments and I'll make a separate video to explain this. Continuing, we have finished this, right? Now on to the last question that we have. And this is a simple plus that's getting printed, right? But if you look closely, it resembles this, right? So if you compare these two, for example, let me put them side by side so that it's easier to compare. So if how do we put it side by side? Okay, this way. So if you compare these two, what do you see? Over here, this also is a box, right? This is a box with 5 row and 5 column. This also is a box with 5 row and 5 column. Here, what did we do was we printed 1 in the center row and the center column, and all of the other cells were filled with 0. Over here, in the center row and the center column, we will print asterisk, and all of the other cells will be filled with a space, right? So we can take the logic that we had discussed over here and we can modify that to solve this question, right? So since we already know how to solve this, let's go straight to IntelliJ and let's create a new Java class. Let's name this as Q14. Let's have a main method over here. Now let's grab the solution or the main method from Q11 Solution 1. Let's paste that over here and let's make some changes. So we're not supposed to print 1 and 0. What are we supposed to do is we're supposed to print an asterisk or a space, right? So here we are leaving 2 spaces. So let's leave 2 spaces here as well. So with just this change, if I run the code, I should get this, which is absolutely correct, right? And if I change the value of n to 5, I should get this, which is what we expected to do, right? So with this, we have come to the end of the list of questions that we had to solve for the box subcategory, which is just one of the categories, by the way, in the nested loop patterns. So with this, we have come to the end of the video as well. So I hope I've been able to teach you something new and useful. And this is just one of the many videos that we are going to have on nested loop patterns. We've got a lot more questions to solve, which we are going to cover one by one. So if you have any suggestions, feedback or queries, feel free to put them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.